love Dragon Quest? I remember one time in elementary school, we went on a class trip to a symphony orchestra. Probably would have been in like Philadelphia or something, but I don't remember exactly. Now, at this time, I was very young, and the music I would have been listening to was just the contemporary pop of the era. Like, I remember being really into the boy bands, like, Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. I very distinctly remember Eiffel 65 and, Blue Dabba Dee. That was a very important song to me when I was young. Honestly, it still is now. That song kind of owns. I don't remember the specifics of this orchestral performance or what piece was being played or anything, but I do remember just being terribly bored. I mean, I didn't get it at all, right? Like, the pace of the music was slow, like, the concert hall was cold and stuffy, like, it just felt like music for old people, right? Like, what am I doing here? Now, let's fast forward a couple of years. I go over to my grandparents' house, and they have a new game for me to try, so I'm looking at the box, and I see these characters that look very suspiciously like characters straight out of Dragon Ball Z. Oh, and it's an RPG by the same people that made Final Fantasy X? I'm sold. So, I put it in the PS2, turn it on, I play a little bit, and then I hear this. That's a game changer. Sometimes for a style of music to really click with you, especially when you're younger, you have to hear it in a context that you understand. For me, Dragon Quest VIII really was my first proper introduction to music that sounds like European classical music. And sure, I had played Final Fantasy games before, so I was at least vaguely familiar with some orchestral sounds, but Dragon Quest VIII's soundtrack was not just some orchestral textures in the context of a larger score. Like, this was literally a concert hall performance coming out of my video game. Even though orchestras are more common in video games today, the particular style that composer Koichi Sugiyama used for Dragon Quest, with its heavy influence from the actual European classical music tradition, is still really unique in games, and so I think it deserves a little bit more attention. The song I'm going to look at in this video is from Dragon Quest III, and it's called Small Shrine. In the Dragon Quest series, there are certain musical paradigms that appear in all of the games, and one of those is that there's always a song for these quote-unquote shrine locations, which are littered around the map. They usually have NPCs that give hints about where to go next, or sometimes they have teleporters that transport you across the map, that kind of thing. Now, even though these shrine locations mostly serve like a functional purpose, Sugiyama tends to score them with the utmost importance, like they're these super sacred places. They always have these gorgeous, dignified, ethereal themes that really hit you emotionally. The closest comparison I can think of is that it's kind of like when you first walk into the Temple of Time in Ocarina of Time, and you hear that like sort of Gregorian chant version of the Song of Time. If you're anything like me, when you walk in there and hear that, you're kind of like, oh, this is a sacred place. I better be on my best behavior. I'm going to look at this song in 3 different versions, because there's been many remakes of Dragon Quest III over the years, and I think it can be interesting to see how the songs have evolved over time. So before we get to the lush, sweeping orchestral version that's in the HD 2D remake that just came out, let's start with the original chiptune version on the NES. Such a cool sound. I really love how they use the triangle channel for the melody instead of for bass, which is what you usually hear in NES music. The NES had 3 channels to work with for writing music. So the typical setup that you would find composers using would be something like, use one pulse channel for the melody, use the triangle channel for the bass, and then use the second pulse channel to fill in the harmony. It might be playing arpeggios of the chords, or maybe it'll be harmonizing with the notes of the melody sometimes. But that's not really what's happening here, because in a sense, this song doesn't even really have a bass line. I'll try to explain what I mean. So we have this melody on top, which sounds kind of like this. And then underneath that, we have these very simple 2-note chords that just kind of descend following the voice leading of the key we're in, which is A minor. So we have this kind of F major sound, then an E minor sound, then a D minor sound, then we get this great kind of A sus sound going to an A minor. But now that we just followed the voice leading, we no longer have the root of the chord at the bottom of the voicing. So continuing along, we have this G sound with the third in the bottom, then this F sound with the third on the bottom. Then we have this kind of like E sus sound. going to an E sound, with again the third on the bottom. It almost gives the impression of like a string section without the cellos or contrabasses, right? You just have like the top three voices, and you're missing the context of the bass line underneath, which in a funny way is kind of exactly what it is, which you'll kind of see when we get to the later arrangements of this song. But what's cool is that you really don't need the bass line to understand what's going on in these chords, because these simple two-note voicings have all the information you need to get a sense of what the harmony is, along with the melody on top, which is actually very colorful. Like, yeah, so that's kind of like an E minor 7 sound. D minor 7. Oh, that's so perfect. It's so beautiful. Then here, we get the ninth on top of the G. Again, another ninth. Oh, it's so gorgeous. But now this is the really crazy part. Listen to this. Okay, so another like D minor 7 sound. Now listen to this. What is this? That is so dissonant. Like, look at this. You have this major 7th interval in there. It's kind of like you have like a D minor 7, then a D sharp diminished 7, then an E minor 7, then back to a D sharp diminished 7. But on this D sharp diminished 7, you get a D on the top of the melody. So you have this super dissonant interval, but it doesn't sound like it. Like, it just sounds so perfect in the context of the song. It's so beautiful. Like, that's perfect. You know, like but you know, one of my guitar teachers used to tell me that, you know, the fewer notes a voicing has, the more beautiful it is. And, you know, when I hear stuff like this, you know, you kind of believe it. And moving on, you have a little bit more chromatic movement where the bottom voices do this. But that super pretty diatonic melody on top just makes them sound like totally natural. Oh, beautiful. You know, composers often, when they try to write chiptune music for the first time, will really struggle with figuring out how to get chords in there, you know? So, you know, they'll play these like super complex arpeggios to try to get all the notes and extensions in there. And yet here we have a song that has no arpeggios. It's just simple two-note voicings moving down following basic voice leading practice and a diatonic melody. And yet we have all of this gorgeous color and complexity in it because of the way everything links together. But that is the entirety of the NES version of this song. Once you get to that, it just goes right back to that. So it doesn't even land on the A minor chord. It just kind of has this perpetual, like, ambiguous feeling, which I think is really cool. All right, let's move on to the Super Nintendo version. Now, the first part of the Super Nintendo version is the same arrangement as the NES version, except now we're using string samples instead of the synth channels. But what Sugiyama usually does in the updated remake versions of his songs is add some embellishments to the arrangements on the first loop. That's exactly what he does here. So let's see what it sounds like. Oh, sorry guys, I had to step out for a second to take a call, but while we wait for me to get back, have you heard about the video game I'm developing? It's called Detective Instinct Farewell My Beloved, and it's an adventure game about a mysterious woman who goes missing on a train. If you like games like Ace Attorney or Hotel Dusk, or just games with good stories, this might be the game for you. It's coming to both Nintendo Switch and Steam this year, and we would greatly appreciate if you added it to your wishlist on Steam. Link in the description. Thank you so much. Oh look, I'm back. Slower tempo. Ending section. Oh. So if the original arrangement felt kind of like a string section just minus the cellos and basses, this first loop of the SNES version is basically adding back in the cellos and basses to fill out the arrangement. So you have the basses playing the roots of the chords, and then the cellos playing these really neat quarter note triplet arpeggios, just kind of filling out the harmony a little bit more. And the melody also jumps up an octave, to give that little bit of extra intensity to the repeat. The coolest part, though, is how he changes the ending, because if the original arrangement kind of felt like it never resolved, this one ends with this somber and triumphant, A sus to A minor things. Powerful stuff. All right, finally, let's listen to the orchestral version. This is still the same arrangement as the NES version. Just, oh my god, hearing it with those live strings. That's great. This extended ending is so great. I got no words, man. So in my last video about Final Fantasy VII, I kind of talked about how, in some games there's some benefit to using samples as opposed to a live orchestra because, the samples can have their own unique kind of texture and sound to them, and they can kind of give the game an identity of its own as opposed to just sounding like an orchestra. But, I think this example makes it pretty clear that it's a case-by-case basis sort of thing. Dragon Quest music was just made to be played by a live orchestra, or at least a lot of it was. So a song like this just really thrives in that setting where the strings just breathe and it just sounds so beautiful and emotional. So the live version's arrangement isn't that much different from the Super Nintendo's arrangement, but there's some changes, like your eighth note triplets, which just sound awesome. Like you can really hear it in that one part that's like. Gorgeous. And of course the ending is extended a little bit just to give, a little bit more extra weight to that big climactic, like A sus to A minor ending. It's just incredible. It's just an incredible arranging. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus analysis. I said before that there are these paradigms in Dragon Quest games where, every game has a different shrine theme, right? So how does Sugiyama approach writing different shrine themes for different Dragon Quest games? Let's have a listen to this song from Dragon Quest V called Saint and see if you can spot the similarities between it and Small Shrine. So much like Small Shrine, we have a melody on top and these very simple two-note chord voicings on the bottom that just kind of move based on the needs of the voice leading, right? Like. So again, you have a song with just three voices. This tune is actually a lot more chromatic than Small Shrine is, and it's also in a major key, this time C major instead of A minor. So whereas Small Shrine has this sort of dignified, somber, and serious kind of sacred place feeling, Saint ends up sounding a little bit more like a holy place, but a warm and inviting holy place, a place of respite, a place where you're safe, right? A safe haven. And you can achieve those very subtly different emotional distinctions using more or less the same kind of arranging technique. It's super cool. Now, this definitely will not be the last time I talk about Dragon Quest music on this channel. I'm pretty sure of that. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Leave a comment on this video about your favorite Dragon Quest music, and maybe I'll have a chance to take a look at it. Don't forget to wishlist Detective Instinct Farewell My Beloved on Steam. The link is in the description. Well, alright, that's it for me. Until next time, peace. Still got my Final Fantasy XII demo disc, too. I'm gonna finally play that someday. Oh, shit.